Mark, AI's role in society became a focal point of discussion, highlighting its unexpected applications. Nature's shifts spared no corner of the globe as eclipses darkened skies, floods, earthquakes, fires, and extreme weather phenomena wreaked havoc, leaving incredible marks on communities worldwide. The news of President Ibrahim Raisi's death in 2024 after a helicopter crash in Iran's east Azerbaijani province came as a political shock, as it would have in any country where a similar incident had taken place. Zionists ended exploited the collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime to further its own objectives in Syria, expanding its illegal occupation in the Golan Heights in violation of the international treaties and targeting military sites across the country. The 2024 Olympic Games were a major global event, with athletes from around the world competing on the world stage. Algeria celebrated several achievements of numerous Olympic champions after historic participation and triumph winnings. As the year concluded, it became clear that the decisions made in 2024 would leave a lasting imprint on the future. No single event could define the year, but collectively, they provided a snapshot of the political, social, and technological forces shaping the world.
Well, hello again and welcome, dear viewers. And allow me to welcome with us here in studio Dr. Hamoud Salhi, an Associate Dean Professor of International Studies from California State University. Thank you indeed, Dr. Hamoud Salhi, and welcome back home.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Always an honor. Fun to be here with you.
Thank you so much. And of course, joining us live from the UK, we're thrilled as well to have Dr. Yvonne Ridley, political analyst, Middle East specialist, joining us from the UK. Thank you, ma'am, for accepting our invite, and Happy New Year.
Yes, and the same to you as well.
Also from New York, joins us live via Skype is Mr. Mohammed Isati, financial analyst and geopolitical observer. Glad to have you with us again, Mr. Mohammed. Happy New Year for you too.
Happy New Year to all of you again, and thank you to be part of this family and enjoy all of you. And again, I hope for some love, peace in this world on this eve of the new year.
Hopefully. And last but not least, from Paris, France, our own Dr. Abdenour Toumi joins us live via Skype as well. Dr. Abdenour Toumi, you're a geopolitical researcher and journalistic author specialized in Maghreb studies and the MENA region. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. And Happy New Year to you and to your distinguished guests and all the Al-24 viewers.
Thank you so much. All right, let's start our discussion. And just as protocol and good manners have it, ladies first. Dr. Yvonne Ridley, how would you assess the year 2024 as it just concluded? I know this might be a little vague and general question that's not easy to answer in a couple of minutes, but what marked you the most here as we witnessed, for example, monumental elections globally, including Mexico's first women president, and shifts in India and even in the UK, where you're from? How do these political changes shape global alliances and power dynamics, according to you?
Well, it's been a roller coaster of a year. I think emotionally we've reached highs, like the appointment of Mexico's first female leader. I mean, that was quite a landmark achievement, and that was wonderful news. Depending which side of the political fence you sat on, the news was not as seismic. In the UK, where we had the arrival of Sir Keir Starmer and his Labour government. Alarmingly, more than half of the British cabinet were revealed to be in the pay and sway of Israeli lobbies. So that was quite alarming and put a huge question mark over exactly who the government is representing when it's looking at foreign policy, especially in the Middle East in these troubled times. But for me, the biggest moment, it didn't involve politicians or Palestinians. It involved a heroic French woman called Gisèle Pellicot, who made a courageous stand when it emerged that she had been the victim of a terrible rape case in which her husband had drugged her and invited hundreds of men to rape his wife. It was an extraordinary story. I can't remember the husband's name, but I do remember Gisèle Pellicot because she emerged with so much admiration of women around the world because of the dignified and courageous way she conducted herself in what was a truly horrific case, which really, I think, damaged the French psyche in its Olympic year, which had, you know, dominated the headlines until this whole case burst onto the scene. So very strange year, and obviously I couldn't mention 2024 without talking about the Zionist era, as it's now been referred to, the atrocities and crimes that are being committed and continue to be committed in Palestine. And the big losers in all of this, of course, is the West and Israel's strategic supporters. It's, you know, the conflict in Gaza has hit so many lows, and it continues to do so.
Definitely. Of course, we'll dive deeper into the Gaza file just a little bit later. But now from regional and international development to national development, where Algeria also saw important presidential elections and the re-election of President Abdelmajid Tebboune for a second term. Now, how one sees this shaping Algeria's political landscape over the next 5 years actually differs from one person to another. And here, Dr. Hamoud Salhi, how do you personally read this?
It's a major event in Algeria's political life. But this is not the first time we had elections in Algeria that went smoothly and done well. The biggest change, I think, in this election is that we saw the court, the legal system at work. There were some disputes over the elections, the results of the elections. The court got together and made a decision, and it was finalized, and we moved on. That speaks to the maturity of the institutional, democratic institutions in Algeria. For the next 5 years, for example, if we were to look at that, I think we're going to build on that momentum, particularly looking at engaging civil society, political parties, group involved in voluntary civic duties, things like that. I think that's what we're shifting. Economically, already we've seen some of the data coming from the IMF, for example, International Monetary Fund, that saying that is reporting that the GDP growth, for example, this year is around 4.0, and it's likely to continue at the level. This is impressive considering the toll, the natural disaster, all the things that are happening, that happened in this country. Also, the big project, the renewable energy, where the government has a plan by, I believe, 2035 or so, that 27%, if I'm not mistaken, of all electricity will be based on renewable energy. And then you have the digital infrastructure with the AI, the artificial intelligence, that seems to be in vogue now, and it seems like everybody wants to do it, which is a major transformation. It's good to hear that Algeria appears to be prepared by organizing or establishing a center or so organizing groups to look into this phenomenon, particularly the involvement of the Ministry of Higher Education and other research institutions. Along with that, you have the what is it, transportation, the infrastructure, the diversification of the economy. Some of the lessons I think we learned from the last years or so is that you need to have what I call personally is the economic independency of decision makers. We have politically decisions are independent. Algeria is sovereign. Reliance on economic needs on other countries should be at the minimum because it gives us the leverage to do other things, particularly the political things or other things that would benefit Algeria's national interest. That's overall how things, I think, I see them, yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We will dive deeper, of course. And let me include Dr. Abdenour to me. Dr. Abdenour, how has the re-election of Tebboune been received by the Algerian public in general, especially the younger generation, according to you?
It is indeed a milestone time. Actually, the re-election of President Abdelmajid Tebboune for a second term, and as we all know, I mean, the 2024 year did coincide with the 70th anniversary of the glorious Algerian uprising against the French occupation. And that was actually, again, a momentum that the political leaders, and notably President Abdelmajid Tebboune, did to somehow alternate the persona and that sense of the youth who did show up to the polls on last September, September 6, 2024. And actually, Professor Sarhi used a term, and it's exactly that, the right term, and the key term as well, when he said maturity. And Algerians are showing this political maturity that goes with a smooth and a peaceful transition, again, moving from a generation to a generation. And this is a very, very solid, actually, message locally, regionally, and internationally, and particularly in the region, while we saw all these political, again, rapid developments are moving so fast. And this is why it is important now for the youth to take the lead. And also another message comes from these elections, of the election of President Majid Tebboune, is about leadership. And this is what we need, or from now on, it's about leadership. Leadership indeed with a vision and with a strategy as well.
And speaking of vision and strategy, Dr. Abdenour Toumi, let me bring Mr. Mohammed Chris Sassi. Since the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, during his electoral campaign, actually said that his next term will be economic by excellence. How do you personally assess the economic policies promised during Tebboune's campaign? Have they started to translate into tangible improvements for Algerians? How do you assess Algeria's efforts in manufacturing, for example, agriculture, and reducing import dependence?
Yes, as you said, and I think I'm just going to reiterate, while much of the world struggles with inflation and economic instability, Algeria, as Dr. Salhi and Dr. Toumi said, has emerged as a nation capable of shielding its citizens from such pressure. Since President Abdelmajid Tebboune come to power, the government has focused on building an economy that prioritizes self-sufficiency and insulate itself from global economic turmoil. Yes, with the strategy of subsidized government oversight and a unique approach to economic management, Algeria is indeed reshaping his market to benefit its citizens rather than bowing to external pressure. Yes, self-sufficiency, the cornerstone or President Tebboune vision. Under his leadership, Algeria has doubled down on effort to become self-sufficient, not only in the raw material, but also in finishing goods. This focus, I should say, has shifted the country away from his heavy reliance on import and toward strengthening its domestic production capacity. Yes, few keys that I will name, like you said, the local manufacturing, from consumer goods to industrial products. The government has incentivized local production to reduce the dependence of foreign import. Agricultural expansion as well. Many investments in farming, technology, and land development have boosted Algeria's ability to feed its population without relying on international market. And then this drive for self-reliance, I should say, is coupled with the a bold stance against the influence of larger international corporations. Yes, you have a system also that is beginning to emerge, control the price for citizens. Then I know that the time is limited, but I would like to conclude in saying that yes, it was a challenge, but it was also new opportunities, and the Tebboune government has shown that a well-balanced economic system can protect consumer and foster sustainable growth. Yes, we are maybe a model, we can be a model for others.
Yeah, and here, Dr. Hamoud Salhi, we have seen a lot of policies, including subsidies, price caps, but I would like to ask you about the role of state-owned enterprises in stabilizing the Algerian market. According to your observation, do we see that these policies are effective? As Mr. Mohammed Sassi said, that it is kind of safeguarding and shielding the purchasing power of Algerians, and it's not really that affected with inflation, as we can see in other nations.
Although there are views of cap prices subsidized, these are needed. And for the simple reason, this is to achieve what we call social equity. It's needed to make sure that Algerians have the basic necessities covered. We're talking about bread, we're talking about milk, we're talking about sugar. These are very, very important nutrients that the country needs. And it's along the line of what the state responsibility as a social institution that goes towards the benefit of the vast majority of the population. They also bring some kind of social stability. And despite the fact, as I said earlier, there are some abuses. It's also a way of controlling inflation. When you have prices capped and under control, this helps, as economics will tell you, maintain the economy in such a way that it doesn't go downward and achieve major crisis. And so it's part of that when I see it, a responsibility that states have towards their citizens, and one of which Algeria appears to be, or is doing the right thing. I mean, the amount of money that we put, that the state puts into subsidized into this project is amazing, and it's on top, I believe, around 40%. And we're talking about, healthcare. We're talking about issues with the states, the enterprise, the national companies are there to to protect the public interest. And despite the fact, again, I return to the idea that there are some inefficiencies, but over a long time, those things could be overcome. But this does not take away the merits of these policies. They are needed and needed to continue, and because they serve the vast majority of the Algerians, and it's well within what the purpose of this Algeria's state is all about, is making sure that the citizens are treated all fairly and with some kind of justice, a bit small in some degrees. Yeah.
Perfect. And just to include Dr. Yvonne Ridley, when you hear analysis like this, a country like Algeria's, let's say, inward-focused economic model, limiting imports and so on, what comes to your mind? Does this model perhaps pose risks of isolation, as some might see it, or does it serve as a model of sovereignty for other nations? See it, for example, Algeria's limitation of multinational corporations in critical sectors, contributing to its economic independence.
Well, I think that Algeria is a shining example to every country in the world today, including the one where I'm living in Scotland, that has aspirations to become independent. Here is a country which doesn't owe any money to any organizations in the world. It doesn't have any crippling debts, and it's got a vibrant economy. It has a workforce that isn't really fully exploited at the moment, and that I imagine will be a priority of the government. But Algeria is a stake of so much hope to those of us who aspire to live in an independent country. And like all countries that have escape the shackles of colonialism, it's doing very well. And it's doing well for its people. And I think that Algeria will certainly be a country which is going to emerge very strongly in the economic sector in the next decade.
Thank you indeed, Dr. Yvonne Ridley. And just to conclude this chapter, a final question to you, Mr. Mohammed Koussassi, since you're the financial expert here. Very briefly, please, though, do you see that Algeria's management of oil and gas revenues strengthened its economic resilience somehow? And what more can be really done to diversify its economy?
Yes, indeed, Algeria should diversify its economy to succeed. Yes, diversification is crucial for Algeria economic success, especially given the country heavy reliance on oil and natural gas export. While hydrocarbons currently account for around 95% of Algerian export revenue and a large portion of it, of its GDP. This dependence poses significant risk. The global oil price fluctuation, as well as the growing shift toward renewable energy. This can negatively impact Algeria economy if it remains overly dependent on this factor and don't look for diversification. So here are some reasons, in my humble opinion, why diversification is important for Algeria and potentially area for growth. Number one is to reduce the vulnerability to the global oil price fluctuation. Algeria economy has historically been highly sensitive to change in oil price. When oil price drop, Algeria revenue decrease, which can lead to budget deficit, higher unemployment, and economically instability. Diversification, again, should be in other sectors. We have also sectors that have to create jobs and reduce unemployment. And the oil and gas sector in Algeria is a capital incentive, yes, but it's not creating that much employment. Now we have the chance to have the renewable energy market. Algeria is well positioned to invest in renewable energy, particularly with our solar power. Given it was sunny desert, you have the biggest desert almost in the world. Then we can also look for expanding the non-hydrocarbon sector. Yes, agriculture, for example. Algeria has a large land mass. Its import is a significant portion of its food. Expanding agricultural production, particularly in urban farming and sustainable practice, could help reduce the dependency on import, create jobs, and improve food security. And also, like you said also before, manufacturing, moving away from a reliance on important goods. And of course, you have another area that we should think to expand is the tourism in Algeria. Algeria has a rich cultural, historical, and also all this natural beauty you take from 2,000 kilometers of coast, so, and the desert, and all what is in desert, like Sifar, etc. Yes, and of course, don't forget that you are a young population, 70% are less than 30 or 30 or 40 years old. Donc you have the technology and innovation, the artificial intelligence. The young can do that. And I think you have this, and I know we are limited by the time, but I can tell you that the exchange with the trade American Chamber of Commerce, they talk about Algeria in the intelligence application. I don't want to go on and on. I just would like to conclude because it's something I have to say. Yes, for diversification, as I said before, but you have also...
Yes, a point clear, Mr. Mohammed Grace Sassi.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we have very limited time. We need to move on. And just to wrap up this chapter, let's take a break and follow this recap report by Marwa Balaiwar.
2024 was a decisive year in Algeria's history. It was marked by
Monsieur Sassi,
Yes.
s'il vous plaît, كي تكون تهدر اخضر برك في الكاميرا باش تكون فاصلينا.
Ah, d'accord, je vais bouger ma caméra, d'accord.
Voilà.
Je regardais.
Merci beaucoup, صحيت.
Après, ça va pour l'instant, vous apprenez quelque chose ou pas?
Oui, très bien, très bien. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, no problem.
renewal of confidence in President Abdelmajid Tebboune for a second term, thus allowing him to carry on the reform process that he had already initiated. President Tebboune prioritized national dialogue, engaging political actors to elaborate a unified roadmap for Algeria's future. This approach, based on dialogue and consultation, is enshrined in the principle of partnership with all national forces.
وهذا إلا الجزائر اللي تديرها، إلا الجزائر لأنها دولة ديمقراطية شعبية.
As part of an Algerian political tradition which reflects the aspiration of its people, a meeting between the government and governors or walis was held, focusing on strengthening decentralization and directing local projects to serve citizens. This initiative was based on a new vision for managing local communities, through which the Algerian leadership identified solutions to the obstacles hindering local development within the framework of development equity and rigorous management of public funds.
قمت بتنصيب لجنة خبراء وأسندت لها مهمة إعداد مشروعي قانوني البلدية والولاية على نحو يقضي على مختلف العوائق ويجعل من هاتين الجماعتين ركيزة المنظومة المؤسساتية وأداة فعالة للتنمية المحلية، حيث تم في هذا الصدد العمل على رفع كافة العراقيل.
Before this, the Algerian president paid several visits to various regions of the country. The province of Tizi Ouzou was at the center of major development this year, with the inauguration of vital infrastructure.
Fin février maximum, on commence à distribuer partiellement de l'eau traitée.
The President of the Republic emphasized the importance of food and water security, ordering the completion of major desalination plants across the national territory before the month of Ramadan. Economically, Algeria took bold steps toward enhancing self-sufficiency. The government decided to suspend the import of certain goods and support domestic production while protecting the citizens' purchasing power. As for the role played by the youth in enhancing national economy, Algeria set up programs to foster startups and micro-enterprises. Legislation was also high on 2024 agenda. with the issuance of new laws for vital sectors such as education and health, as well as the reform of the municipal and provincial laws. 2024 exemplifies Algeria's unwavering commitment to building a strong, democratic, and modern state, with multiple efforts converging toward one goal: improving the citizens' life conditions and paving the way for a prosperous future.
Welcome back, dear viewers. Our program continues, and up next, we're discussing wars and conflicts and Algeria's peace efforts. And to discuss the first question in this chapter, Dr. Abdenour Toumi. The genocidal war in Gaza has recorded atrocious massacres, and we've seen millions of displaced people, nearly everyone, that is. International support for Gaza shied away, especially at the beginning. But Algeria has always been there to alleviate the voice of Palestine and Palestinians. Now, how effective has Algeria's unwavering support for Palestine been in rallying international attention, according to you?
Actually, I mean, when we speak about Algeria's position toward the just cause for the Palestinians, and not only the Palestinians, but also, as we all know, I mean, Algeria has been the voice of the voiceless. And this has been going for decades. And it's an imperative of Algeria's foreign policy doctrine. Now, as far as the ongoing, frankly, I can't say war. It is a carnage that is taking place in Gaza Strip. And this is with the complicity of the Western superpowers and to some extent with the so-called international community. So again, Palestinians have been going now for more than 14 months in this carnage that is taking place with the, again, the silence of the so-called, quote-unquote, civilized Westerns or West period. But the just in the world, I mean, whether our world leaders and notably one we saw, for instance, in South America, countries like Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela, and so on, and the international public opinions, I mean, who has been speaking up strongly. And then we saw in that mobility of the youth and the students that took place last spring and summer in those prestigious Ivy schools in the US, in the UK, in France, and even in South America. So this is a strong message is sending to the Zionist leaders, and that, yes, you might continue in your carnage, but there are just people out there who are unmasking your atrocities, and this one day will end.
Perfect.
So, I mean, again, the short answer about Algeria is, I mean, there, and Algeria has been playing a major role, and particularly in the UN Security Council as a non-permanent member. And they have been, and the Algeria's representative has been playing an excellent and doing an excellent job. And I mean, day in and day out, it was unmasking the atrocities of the Zionists in not only in Palestine, but also we saw what they did in Lebanon. And now these days, the aggression in Yemen as well.
Perfect. And that's my next question to Dr. Hamoud Salhi. So Algeria, of course, has become increasingly active, diplomatically speaking, defending just causes in general, and let's say particularly in the Middle East and Africa even. So how effective has this strategy been in boosting Algeria's global standing, according to you?
You know, it's not unusual for the Algerian diplomacy to see successes. We've seen this in the 70s and 80s, and Algeria's mediated several conflicts, including hostages that were freed thanks to Algeria, the Iran hostage crisis between the United States and Iran. The history is there. Algeria's diplomats are also known for their seriousness, coming to meetings were very well prepared. We see this recently. We've been seeing this in the United Nations Security Council by presenting at the right time resolutions or draft of resolutions, continuously bringing the Palestinian case to the forefront of the Security Council, and also doing the little work. For example, just weeks ago, or maybe last week, when Algeria was successful in making known that there are some members who are not deprived of seeing some documents that only certain members of the Security Council have the privilege to see, that goes counter to this, the Security Council or the spirit of the United Nations Charter. And it was made public that now, thanks to the Algerian efforts, that all documents and all publications are to be seen by all members of the Security Council. So these are these have a huge impact on how international law is done and should be done. We are at a very, very critical juncture of finding new ways of how to address issues of biasness, issues of ethnocentric, issues of, it's only the good people or the human being, only Westerners. I mean, it's tragic to see today that the Palestinians are not seen as humans, or that the Sudanese or other people of the third world. This idea has to be fought. And I think the Algerians have done a long way in that, and their impact can be seen on multiple levels. And I think it will continue because of the principles on which Algeria stands, and also the Algerians diplomats, very dedicated, very aware of the role that they have to do, and what is expected of them. An Algerian that believes in sovereignty, that believes in non-interference of other states in the internal affairs, and full independence of all states, including the Western Sahara, including the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Perfect indeed. And Dr. Yvonne Ridley, what role can Algeria play in mitigating broader Middle East tensions, such as the aggression on Lebanon and the expansion of the war into Syria now, and the involvement of Iran and Yemen? What's your reading on this in general, according to your observations?
I think the time has come now for Algeria to step out of the shadows and take a more dominant role in world affairs. And Algeria has always been on the right side of history when it comes to Palestine and the plight of the Western Sahrawi. And I think because of its incredibly rich revolutionary past, Algerians know the cost of freedom. And, you've got this magnificent monument in the center of the capital, which shows the blood price the Algerian people have paid for that freedom. And I think that the time is now coming where Algeria should step up to the plate and help encourage and advise some of the other Arab League leaders of the foolishness of the alliances that they are making against the Palestinians, normalizing of relationships. And I knew you would ask me about this, and I was going to say, why hasn't Algeria followed the line of the Irish and closed down the Israeli embassy? But of course, Algeria hasn't even started diplomatic relations with the Zionist state. And, you know, a lot of countries are like weather vanes. They blow around in the wind and they point in all directions. But Algeria is like a lighthouse. It's been solid. It doesn't move. It points in one direction, and it has been this way on the issue of Palestine. And I think it needs to pump up the volume and use its voice a little bit more, because, you know, it's the largest country in Africa. Its economy is on the up. It is going to be a force for good in the future. And I think the time to be more muscular when it comes to foreign policy is now.
Thank you indeed. And Dr. Abdul Toumi, back to you. Sudan's civil war has had a devastating impact on the region as well, and it's almost forgotten now. How do you see the diplomatic steps Algeria has actually taken to promote peace and stability in Africa? Are they enough?
Actually, to some extent, yes, it is enough, but Algeria, I mean, cannot do it by itself. But Algeria has been pushing for, again, a peace process and helping to break through. And actually, Mr. Lamamala is doing a great job. Actually, he brought back the Sudanese tragedy to the world stage because, again, as you stated earlier, I mean, unfortunately, it was sided because, I mean, to some extent, with the complicity of some regional power, I mean, who have been playing a destabilization role in the region. And Algeria is directly concerned because it's not sure, I mean, don't have borders with Sudan, but it's, in terms of security, Algeria is concerned because of the, again, the migrant issue and the terrorist groups, I mean, national terrorist groups, I mean, who have been moving and active in the region and notably in Chad. And so this brings us to Libya. So this why all are connected now. And again, Algeria now has to step up and play a dominant role. And because it is a pivotal state and has the leverage also to contribute in terms of security, stability, and prosperity. So this is why, I mean, and it's a part of the new paradigm of Algeria's foreign policy. It's preemptive and active. So it has to play, I mean, to use, again, its leverage in order to bring stability and security in the region. But this is, again, we saw that Algeria has, again, moved its pawns within some other members, African members in the African Union on the Sudanese case, so that with the Libyan, because all are connected, and this brings us to the Algerian national security concern.
Perfect. And Mr. Mohammed Sassi, I know this might seem a little bit irrelevant to some, but I insist on asking this particular question. Could Algeria's growing diplomatic role somehow translate into stronger economic partnerships and trade opportunities? Or could Algeria's actually stance come at a heavy price that could take a toll on its economy?
Well, I just like to follow a little bit about the Algeria regional power and diplomacy and their success. Algeria, to answer your question partly, has emerged as a notable regional power in North Africa, and its diplomatic influence, particularly at the United Nations reflects its strategic position and active engagement in both regional and global issues. Several factors contribute to Algeria's success. As my predecessor said, Algeria have a legacy on anti-colonial advocacy, post-independence diplomacy. Algeria, since the independence from France in 1962, marked the beginning of the pursuit of predominant diplomatic role. The country became a vocal advocate for decolonization, anti-imperialism, and the right of the oppressed people around the world. And we have this Western Sahara question, for example, where Algeria is very active. But the stance and the support from various other nations, particularly in Africa, help, and also in the Middle East. And also I would like to make a point that we didn't talk much about is Algeria played an influential role in the non-alignment country. And it was a balance for the influence of the corridor. And I would like to add.
Yes. Mr. Mohamed Sassi, Algeria's stances are really known. We know how fair Algeria plays when it comes to supporting these nations. But then at what price? That is my question. Is this going to be against Algeria and its economy because it's playing fair?
Well, you have Algeria is not only a regional power in Africa, but Algeria is the biggest country in Africa. Algeria has 6 borders. So the economical power in Algeria is there. We just have to look at the African market. Algeria is a country to deal with. And we can talk about the American or the European. Why they talk always about the geostrategic position of Algeria? Because Algeria is a partner that you cannot ignore. Yes, maybe it will be some downfall. You have this acts of, I should say, Rabat, Washington, D.C., and Tel Aviv. Everybody knows that. But this doesn't stop Algeria to look by her power, geostrategic power, and also his economy and his manpower to be a main player. I don't think it's going to be any country who can stop that, specifically if you look through the market, the only market that's still free for the world, and that everybody would like to conquer is Africa. And Algeria have a natural position in Africa. And I don't know if I am clear in what I'm saying, but
It is actually clear. And here this leads me, because you said something like a key word, that Algeria is a partner that is not easy to ignore. And here Dr. Hamoud Salhi helped me out on this point. How crucial is Algeria's energy leadership, for example, in influencing its geopolitical positioning?
So we've seen it. What I call it was a smart policy, how Algeria handled what you call the Ukrainian impact on the oil crisis, where Algeria went ahead, signed a treaty with, or expanded, strengthened its relationship with Italy, providing around 11%, I believe, of all European needing gas. And it made it clear that it is not going to replace the Russian oil, for example, that the Europeans used to get from Russia, and now they are not getting it because of the war in Ukraine. Algeria took the opportunity, while it understood that this is an opportunity, but it has to be sort of done in such a way that it doesn't threaten, or it sends the impression that Algeria is replacing Russia, because Algeria has a strategic relationship with Russia. So the energy, the oil as a weapon in international politics is very, very important. And we've seen it, for example, if you go back to 1973, when we had the October War, Algeria played a major role in rallying the Arab countries, in rallying against the Israelis, and later on, Algeria, when it nationalized its oil, it led to a movement of nationalizing the raw materials, and it led later on to the establishment or the organization of the extraordinary meeting of the United Nations General Assembly to discuss the new world order. And that new world order was led by Algeria, and it was thanks to the Algerian that meeting happened. And it led to a conversation for so many years about looking at changes in the tariff, how raw materials are treated. And the Algerian position was the oil raw material or the raw material should be as expensive or the same price as those of ready-made products. The Europeans, the Americans, the Western world thought or believe that the made product should be more expensive than the Algerians. And the Algerians, again, this philosophy that we have to value our oil. Late President Houari Boumediene, for example, when Algeria nationalized its oil in 1971, the French said, well, we don't care, it's a red oil, it's not good oil. But the President Boumediene replied, it's red because of the blood of the martyrs. The same thing, the Russian came in, and when the French said, we don't want, fine, you nationalize it, we're not gonna get your wine. The old days, Matija was always, it was full with wine and raisin and all of that stuff. Well, the Russians came in and took that, and suddenly, which was in retrospect a bad move of the time. Now, we destroyed all the land, the vines that made it, for So the point is that you have this vision and understanding that this is a material, that this is a product that is strategic, and it should be used to achieve national interest. If we don't sell it, it's there for another generation to get it. So I'm not going to sell ourselves cheap. That's why when you look at the OPEC, the oil producing countries, the several meetings that we had in Oran last year with the oil company, Oil Energy, and all of that, all speaks to the volume, how Algeria sees this product in the international market. And it has used its advantage with taking a balanced view and a balanced approach. So it looks all sides, but in the end, it's the Algeria's national interest that dictates how this policy is moving forward. Yeah. So it has a huge impact globally.
Indeed, thank you. And Dr. Yvonne Ridley, Algeria has been really active at the diplomatic level, as we've been discussing. But now, according to your observations, what more can Algeria do, for example, to balance its focus between the Middle East and African conflicts?
Well, as I said before, Algeria needs to be more muscular. I mean, the one thing that Algeria has 100% behind it is its people. The same cannot be said in neighboring Morocco, where the king there is walking a tightrope as he tries to please the Moroccan public opinion and the West. And of course, signing the Abraham Accords has not been a popular move. That is not a problem Algeria has. And for the leader to stand up and criticize Israel in the way that he has, with the backing of his people, makes him incredibly strong in the OIC and the other organizations around the Middle East. He has the support of the people, which cannot be said for Saudi or the UAE or Jordan or other Arab countries, where the majority of the Arab world, the people in the souks, are totally supporting the Palestinian causes, but their leaders aren't. And that makes the leaders weak. Algeria doesn't have that problem, and that's why it is protected to a certain extent to be more muscular, more loud, and more forthright, which it has been so far, but it could be even stronger because the Algerians are supporting the leadership in this strident support against this Zionist era, where all the rules, all the international laws have been ripped up, all the goodwill from the Holocaust has all been shredded to pieces, and Israel is standing alone as a violent regime which breaks all the rules. And that makes it very weak, and also it makes its allies very weak. And Algeria, happily, has never been in that situation. So I think that Algeria could punch well above its weight, and it is the largest country in Africa. You know, it is not a force to be ignored.
Thank you indeed, Dr. Yvonne Ridley. And we come to the conclusion of this chapter, and we get back shortly after this. Welcome, dear viewers. Our program, the year 2024 in review, is still on, and the next point of discussion is the global political shifts. And I get back to you, Dr. Yvonne Ridley. Donald Trump's victory has sparked debates on his foreign policy's implications, especially in the Middle East and Ukraine. What can Algeria perhaps expect from this new U.S. administration, according to you?
Well, we all know that Donald Trump is a businessman who never misses an opportunity. And so I guess Algeria has got to ask, what is it that we've got that Trump will be after? And try and work out a negotiating position from that. He says a lot of outrageous things. You know, just last week he was demanding the Panama Canal, you know, just a ludicrous attention-grabbing headline. But it really, when Trump does something like that, it means he's setting fire to something else. And while everybody's looking that way, he's juggling with something else in the other direction. Donald Trump should be taken seriously. He's not to be lightly ignored. But as I say, Algeria has to think, what have we got that Trump wants? And because it has been so strong in its support for the Palestinians, I don't think that Trump is even going to try and waste his time with getting Algeria to sign a newly invented version of the Abraham Accords. So it is interesting. Algeria has its red oil, its martyr's oil. And when people talk down resources like oil in a country, you have to wonder why. In Scotland, we're continually told that our oil is running out. Well, when did oil become such a curse? You know, it's a bonus. And Algeria's oil and gas fields, you know, that will not be lost on Trump. Also, the fact that Algeria is a rich country, it doesn't have any debts. And that is something that will interest him, because we keep being told that the West is on the verge of bankruptcy. So the plates of power are shifting very, very slowly, but they are shifting. The G7 countries, largely from the West, are not making as much GDP as the BRICS countries. So I think that a lot of powerful countries will be beating a path to Algeria over the next decade.
Thank you indeed, Dr. Yvonne Ridley. The point is clear. I would like to include Dr. Hamoud Salhi, as we are running out of time and we need to go through this briefly. What is your reading on this? Is the new administration in the US going to affect somehow Algeria's stances or whatsoever when it comes comes to economy, perhaps pressure or something of this sort?
I think, Karim, in all honesty, we need to do our research. And the research is that we know plenty who is Donald Trump. Remember, he's not yet the president, and he's making the headlight. If you come from another world, you don't know, but Donald Trump, and you will say he's the current president. He's not. For example, we know from studies now that Trump, as we've seen it, like to be seen as the person who is leading the events. He makes events, makes stories, whether made him up or not, but he wants to be at the center of attentions. The Japanese were very, very good at this. When Donald Trump visited Japan, they made sure to play into his personality. He became a very good friend of Abe, the prime minister. And in fact, when you look at John Bolton's memoir, he talks there how Trump told him and Pompeo that they don't know Iran, that Abe, the Japanese prime minister, knows Iran, and he sent him to Tehran to speak to the Iranian on his behalf, and nothing came out of it. But the idea is that the playing into the personality of Trump. The second thing that we know is that he's in the end very pragmatic. During, again, to quote John Bolton, you read through his memoirs that you find that Trump wanted desperately to meet with the Iranian leaders. And time and again, he would blame John Kerry for not allowing or telling the Iranians not to meet him, because John Kerry, according to him, was telling the Iranians, don't stay there. Trump will soon be not re-elected, and Biden will win, the Democrat will win, and will take care of business, meaning bringing back Iran to the G5 nuclear deal that they had. So he wanted to see that because he wants to be the person who makes difference. You look at the issue of Western Sahara. When his initial position, now we know, and according to senators' memoirs, that Trump didn't know even Western Sahara knew about it. But we heard it through others, through members in Congress who had close tie to the Kingdom of Morocco, who talked fondly about the case the Western Sahara has been. This is an opportunity we, as Algerians, go in and explain to Donald Trump who we are, the power we have in international politics. And he could understand that. The position was taken by Trump and included Western Sahara as part of the normalization deal, but it didn't go anywhere else. So I see him as a golden opportunity for us to study the person, to look at the trait of Donald Trump and his VP and use that to our advantage. And, you know, data is there. We know that he changes his mind. Just recently, just last week, he changes his position on TikTok, exactly. Just because of personal ties. So it's really, it's a fun to play that game, particularly that you know now who is this leader. You know that 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning, you're going to see that tweets, and that tweet will be controversial, will be to create a crisis. So what we need to know is that what is happening behind the scene, what is happening on that day in the White House, in Congress, that Donald Trump is trying to hide by taking all that light. It's a fascinating time, yeah.
Thank you, indeed, Dr. Hamoud Sarhi. Let me include Mr. Mohammed Krisasi as we are nearing the end of this show. How do you see, this is the question of the day, Mohammed Sassi, how should Algeria position itself amid these global political shifts to secure its interests and still maintain its influence?
Well, Algeria's geostrategic position places it at the crossroad between various global and regional challenges. And this positioning may indeed lead to enduring difficulties in the future, not because of Donald Trump, but because of the position in Africa. You have the regional instability, north of Africa and the Sahel. And we have to deal with that problem, and it is an internal problem, and nobody is going to help except the people who are involved, like Mali, Niger, Libya. Help in which way? We have to find kind of stability. to avoid that the Sahel conflict degenerate and expand to our border. Libya conflict, for example, we are a common border, and is really a war, a proxy war between the Turkish, between the American, and of course between the Russia. And then you have another one. You have the, how can I say that, the migration and the economical ties. How we are going to ignore again and again the possibility of the market in Africa if the borders are not secure or if Africa is not secure. I don't think that the Algeria is in a position of weakness, but in another hand, you have to be careful about what's going on in the area and who are the real players behind the scene. And I think Dr. Sarhi touched a little bit on it, but again and again, our tension with our neighbor regarding, for example, the Western Sahara, the rivalry between Algeria and Morocco is about the Western Sahara, and the Abraham Accord was the cherry on the cake for the Morocco and also against Algeria. Why? Because Trump was wanted to have his name for the glory. He's a megalomaniac. And then he said to the Moroccan, yes, I recognize Western Sahara is going to be part of Morocco, but you have to give me something that is going to be on the map for the rest of the eternity, which is the Abraham Lincoln. Now, how Algeria is going to be part of the global powers and the great power competition, of course, you have to consider the other players, China and Russia. Algeria have a growing relationship with China and Russia, and they could influence with this partnership the foreign policy and the economical priority in the region. Both countries are key players in the global competition for influence in Africa. As I said before, Africa is the market that everybody would like to conquer. And Algeria may need to carefully balance its tie with the Western powers, particularly the United States and European Union, and the strategic partner, which are China and Russia. Of course, I can have a small word about the US and EU relationship. Yes, they are a key regional player, but Algeria ties with the Western, particularly the fight against terrorism and extremism, remain very important. However, as a global power, Algeria may face increasing pressure from both the US and the UN, and they have really to look for that energy policy new partner, which is
clear, Mr. Mohamed Krissasi. Let me just have another opinion as I conclude, since we don't have time. Very briefly, Dr. Abdenour Toumi, what will be the key global challenges that Algeria should prepare for the coming year?
Actually, the challenges are huge ahead, but Algeria, and again, has the capacities to deal with all these challenges. And for instance, dealing with the US and with the new or coming president-elect Donald Trump. And we all know who is Donald Trump, because Donald Trump, he never left politics for the last, I would say, 4 decades. I mean, the scene, but politics for the last 8 years. And in the end of the day, Donald Trump knows well he is a businessman, and he will put, I would say, pragmatism over narcissism. Meaning by this, he is, again, a businessman. He looks for the stability. And this is why Algeria is positioning itself as a stable country. And also, and it's a paradigm shift in its foreign policy, notably in the region and the sub-regional level, in the Sahel, and even in sub-Saharan. I mean by this, crossing Niger and going all the way Nigeria and down. So particularly in the Sahel, and he knows, like the U.S., I mean, the coming administration knows well that they have also their national interest in there. And we saw how, I mean, he's actually another leader, actually, of the next coming administration, Elon Musk, when he proposed, last month or before, to provide an internet with his Starlink to Niger and Mali, and he knows well what's all this about. So this is why Algeria, I mean, it's I would say, its territory and its position, and has to be very, very strong and aggressive on this, and dealing with the major international and regional superpower, and cannot leave, as we would say, the terrain empty for its adversaries, because they know well, I mean, those superpower, regional and international superpowers, they know well the position of Algeria, and again, what Algeria can do, particularly now, because Algeria is very, very strong, again, politically stable, economically is getting much, much, much better, and has, again, a solid unity behind the leadership in Algeria. So all these elements, they are enhancing the position of Algeria in the region, in the Sahel, as well as I can go to north on the Mediterranean as well, and vis-a-vis the European countries.
Thank you indeed, Dr. Abdenour Toumi. And with this, our program comes to a close. A warm thank you to all our guests for their participation and valuable insights. And a special thanks to you, dear viewers, for keeping it here on our channel. We'll be looking forward to your participation and your opinion on the points discussed, as well in our comment section on our social media platforms. I would like also to thank all the technical team and all the journalists who contributed to this program. Goodbye, everyone, and Happy New Year.